I'm not entirely sure I grasp what your comment is saying. I am a Sanders with the last name, but there's nothing sad about that. The video was to point out to folks who confuse me as a grandchild of the Colonel that I am not a grandchild just because I have the last name Sanders. Now, every single person in this family that's a descendant of Colonel Sanders and his siblings have his blood, but we don't all have the last name Sanders. There's a lot of different unique last names in this family. And a lot of my viewers, and even a lot of haters, confuse me as a grandchild of the Colonel's, which I am not. I am a grandchild of his brother, Clarence Sanders. And it's also to point out that my last name is not in every branch of this family. The last cousin I had with the last name Sanders was Howard Sanders. He was the Colonel's uncle's son, and he died in 1997. John Alexander Sanders was his father. Ironically, the same year I was born. And through DNA testing and genealogy research, we have not found any other descendants with the last name Sanders out there today. There used to be a lot of them, but most of them have died off or married out of the name. Even on the Colonel's brother's side, which is my side of the family, not everybody carries the last name Sanders. The Colonel's brother had only 2 children. They were 2 sons, James Sanders and Charles Sanders. James had an adopted stepson named Donovan. And Donovan didn't take the Sanders name. He still had his father's name, Howard. He had 3 daughters and 1 son, and I come from his son. Charles' son is my grandfather. Charles was my great-grandfather, and Clarence, Charles' father, was my great-great-grandfather. So then the Colonel's father, Wilbur David Sanders, would be my great-great-great-grandfather. Well, Charles had 3 daughters and 1 son. All 3 daughters married out of the last name and have their own children with different last names today. And only one of Charles's daughters is still alive today. Bonnie and Sandra passed away shortly after Uncle Jim passed away in 1989. And I'm unaware if their children have children today. I know that their children are still around today. All different last names. But my grandfather had 2 sons, and only one of those sons had children. That's where I come in. I have 2 sisters, several step-siblings, and then there's me. And I'm the last one in that family line that carries the last name Sanders. Now, the Colonel had 3 children, technically 4. Now, the Colonel had 3 children, technically 4, but his firstborn didn't survive childbirth. Harland David Sanders Jr. was his son, who died in his 20s, and he didn't have kids. He had 2 daughters that lived into the 2000s. Margaret, who became Margaret Adams, and Mildred, who became Mildred Ruggles. Mildred lived until about 2010. Margaret died way early in the 2000s. Their children and their children all have different last names now aside from Sanders. And the Colonel's sister's family all has different last names now too.